So, for the last three Wednesday nights, we have been talking about this question: what on earth do we know about heaven? And we've taken it in a couple of different directions, and we have been talking a little bit about the resurrection of the body last week. And I think tonight's study is going to take us down a few different rabbit trails, and I hope you find them interesting. I did, but I wanted to begin tonight with talking about the earthiness of heaven. Now, what I mean by that is it's interesting that when we talk about God's eternal kingdom in Revelation 22, it's not it is not cosmological in nature. It's an image of a city called a New Jerusalem coming back to earth and bringing with it a lot of different promises of new life and the absence of pain and all that type of stuff. But with that very image, which is interesting, there are some questions that I think is worth exploring a little bit. So, when we think of a city in general, we're thinking of a network of human culture, our own culture as well as others not like ours. And the image suggests to me, anyways, the redemption of some elements of things that came into existence over time. So when you begin reading the Bible, it's a very nomadic history of the nation of Israel until you get to Jerusalem being the capital of King David. And from there, we see some of the empires that come into play in relationship to Israel, Babylon, Assyria, Greece, Rome, that type of thing. Um, and all of them carry their own fabric of different cultural outlooks and values and that type of thing. And of course, we talk about culture wars a lot, especially in our own culture. We find that it is a source of disagreement and condemnation by different groups that land on different sides of different things. And because we live in a society that's kind of at war with each other over some of the cultural dynamics, I think, especially within Christianity, we dismiss the idea of culture carrying over into eternity. I don't know what we think, to tell you the honest truth. A lot of times we think that heaven is going to just be one big worship service and everybody's going to kind of look and sound the same, which we know often happens in church, that people do kind of look and sound the same because of the way they interact each week. But a key idea here, I think, is to ask the question, what relics of human history is redeemed on into eternity? Now, that's a big question because culture has changed dramatically over the thousands of years. Our culture is nothing like ancient Rome. It's nothing like ancient Israel. We have our own niche, and so did they. But the subsequent follow-up is this. In talking about the resurrection body, first the resurrection of Christ, and then him being the first fruits, we are promised a resurrection as well. If God redeems the physical matter of who we are to bring us back together into some type of recognizable resurrection, what other material entities would God continue to use on into eternity? That's what I mean by the earthiness of heaven. Would God care enough to want to restore the best of culture, even after it's been long gone and it's only being discovered by archaeologists now that do digs? But some of the things that can be uncovered, let's say it's the treasures of King Tut or other things like that, you constantly are amazed that humanity could do some of the things that it accomplished, the different mind-boggling things that they could do, the building of the pyramids, the seven wonders of the world, all those type of things. Are they gone forever, or are they part of the best of culture that continues on into eternity? And how would that work even? How would God resurrect certain things that have been bombed out in wars, whether it's castles or cathedrals, those type of things? Will the presence of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris continue on into eternity because it was built to the glory of God and it's absolutely astounding to look at and inspiring as well? So you're gonna have to hang with me for a second because you're probably not going to understand why I'm going to give this as an example, but there's a reason for it. And if you'll hang on for the next 7 to 10 minutes, you'll see why I'm using it as an example. So perhaps you've heard of the ships of Tarshish. Now, the first place you might think of in terms of Tarshish is that is a location that Jonah boarded a ship to run away from God. So if you read in the book of Jonah, it says in chapter 1, verse 3, Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa where he found a ship bound for that port. And after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Well, what is Tarshish, number one, and then what are these ships of Tarshish that is mentioned here? Well, Tarshish is a location. It is probably in the Western Mediterranean. Scholars often think that it's related to Spain. And for the Hebrew people, it would be considered kind of the farthest edge of the known world since they were not seafaring people. The ships of Tarshish, I think, I'll show you in a moment, is kind of shorthand for large ocean-going vessels capable of sailing a long distance and carrying different trade commodities. When you think of the ships of Tarshish, you might think of something uh, big that is noted for navigating rough waters so that trade could take place. So that meant they were pretty massive and sturdy vessels. They're large enough to travel across seas, and what we know is that they carried a lot of different commodities as well. And you'll see on the next slide, I'm going to read a portion out of the book of First Kings, but there's a lot of prestige and wealth that's associated with this. And so maybe in our own modern understanding, we might think of the Titanic being that type of a vessel when it initially was made. But back in the book of First Kings, I want to read a portion out of chapter 10. This is talking about the wealth of King Solomon in this section. The Lord appears to Solomon. He is desirous of the help of the Lord to govern God's people. And it says in chapter 9, actually, at the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, the king of Tyre, because Hiram had supplied him with all the cedar, juniper, and gold he wanted. So, a pretty massive building project. Then we're told of the dark side of that down in verse 15. He used forced labor or slaves to build these many different things. And then you move into chapter 10. And he wants to show off to the Queen of Sheba, and she visits Solomon, and he puts all of his wealth on display. And when you get down to verse 14 of chapter 10, it says that the weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenues from merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and governors of the territories. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold and some other things that are mentioned there. But then as you come down to the next paragraph, here is where the ships are mentioned. He talks about the goblets of gold in verse 21 and so forth. But verse 22 says, the king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned, a 3-year voyage before it comes back, carrying gold, silver, ivory, apes, and baboons. That's interesting. So it travels all over the world, gets all this commodity, brings it back for trade and for sale and so forth. And what you find is the ships of Tarshish becomes kind of a metaphor for wealth and pride and prestige and glory. You can find that in Isaiah and Ezekiel. Now, why this rabbit hole? Well, the ships of Tarshish was a cultural symbol of their ability to reach into foreign lands, and the imagination of traveling all over the world and bringing back gold and silver, ivory, apes, and baboons is something that could become a source of not only pride, but boasting. So in Isaiah chapter 23, what's interesting is Isaiah then begins to talk about the potential collapse of the ships of Tarshish because of this pride that came along with it. So in Isaiah 23, it says this, a prophecy against Tyre, wail, you ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed and left without house or harbor. From the land of Cyprus, word has come to them. So this is a long poetic diatribe, and Tarshish is mentioned several times. It's not only mentioned there, but in verse 6 as well. Cross over to Tarshish, wail, you people of the island. It also talks about this as you move down through the chapter, verse 10, till your land as they do along the Nile, daughter Tarshish. And then finally, verse 14, wail, you ships of Tarshish, your fortress is destroyed. Okay, so the idea of the ships of Tarshish is this idea of poetic weight that is condemning the cultural pride, arrogance, and all that goes with that. Having the ability to own that type of a ship, to travel as far as it does. Okay, that's fine. However, so here's a picture, a rendition of a carving, probably what a ship of Tarshish might have looked like. Now, here's how it's relevant to this idea of heaven, okay? Later in the book of Isaiah, so he's already condemned the ships of Tarshish, and what we find taking place is that later, though, in the book, and of course, the book of Isaiah probably has 3 different authors, but in chapter 66 is a chapter about judgment and salvation, and it's talking really about the expectation of some type of kingdom that is still to come. And as it talks about this, what's interesting is that it continues to talk about things that were familiar to that culture. And it says this down in verse 19, 66:19. I will set a sign among them, and I will send some of those who survive to the nations, to Tarshish, to the Libyans and Lydians, famous as archers, to Tubal in Greece, and so forth. And then it goes on, and to distant lands that have not heard of my fame or seen my glory. So there's this idea that Tarshish is not wiped away, but there is going to be glory that is going to be seen in Tarshish once again. So, looking at this slide here, the idea here is okay, there were some things that God condemned about the culture of the city of Tarshish, the ships of Tarshish, but here we find it has a place in chapter 66. And then when I go back to chapter 60 of Isaiah, the ships play a role in that. So if you come down after the chapter begins, arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Verse 3, nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. And then it says this down in verse 5, then you will look and be radiant. Your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth on the seas will be brought to you. The riches of the nations will come. Oh, well, what are you talking about? Oh, here it is. Verse 9. Surely the islands looked at me, to me. In the lead are the ships of Tarshish. So you get a mixed message in Isaiah that there's some things that are really bad culturally speaking, but then there's some things that are really good that continue in expectation into the years to come. Now, I told you that was a rabbit trail. Here's how this illustration brings me to this question. Does God restore the treasures that once shaped the history of mankind? Are they preserved on into eternity? Since we see in Revelation 22 the earthiness of heaven. Heaven comes to earth, this idea of a new Jerusalem. So the follow-up is, are there items of human culture that you would like to see in eternity? So people often read Revelation 22 and says there is no more sea. And inevitably people will say, well, I don't know if I'm going to like heaven because I love boating or I love water skiing or I love fishing or whatever it may be. Are there items of culture that brought great joy in the human experience that might carry over into eternity? Could it be a favorite car, some piece of art like a painting, a restaurant, or how about this, baseball? Since the Guardians are in the playoffs right now, does that all stop when we get to heaven, or are there recreational things that continue? I could have easily worn my golf hat tonight and asked, will there be golf in heaven? So the point is, when we have such an abstract idea of heaven, when you come up with this kind of cartoonish picture that we're sitting on clouds and playing harps for all of eternity, no wonder it's not compelling. But what if God holds to the good things of culture and brings them in to eternity because it brought great joy to mankind? So that's why I use that illustration. The ships of Tarshish have some future role. So that brings me to a follow-up question. Will God resurrect entire cultural neighborhoods? Every culture brings something unique to the human experience. And it's only in your ability to travel to other places do you get to see the beauty of the nations in their art, in their customs. When we live in such a small world, we might be afraid of other cultures, but when you get to see some of these things, you go, "Oh my goodness, that is absolutely amazing." And does God carry forward that type of history and cultural experience? How about special foods in different parts of the world? Does that carry over into heaven as well. So to remove these kind of things leads us back to what is heaven like? Well, is it a culturalist kingdom? And I doubt that it is. I think Revelation 21 and 22 brings us to this point when in Revelation 22, one of the statements that is made is the kings of the earth bring their glory into the new Jerusalem. And so it's a great question to ponder. God is at work, not only now, but into the future as well. And the very imagery that is used in chapter 21 and chapter 22 of Revelation um, is meant to inspire. I'm not sure that we're to take it literally as more symbolic when it talks about the glory of God being brilliant. And there's these 12 gates and 12 angels at the gates and the 12 trees that are bearing fruit and all that type of thing. So it's appealing to the senses. And then in chapter 21, when you come down to verse 23, it says this: the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and the lamp is the lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it, verse 26 says. The honor and glory includes things that are built into the culture of the different nations. And so I guess this idea of heaven and what resurrection looks like, not just on a physical body level, but cultural level, might suggest that there's all kinds of things that might be resurrected: art, music, language, traditions that bring glory to God. So, just some thoughts way out there. Can't prove a thing, but it's, worth kind of looking at and considering. So, when you think about neighborhoods and you think about different things that neighborhoods symbolize, when you think of a neighborhood, you think of shared stories, shared places, restaurants, food, maybe music and art, a sense of home, a sense of being rooted. So that's why people always look with fondness upon home, look back upon it because it has built so much into their spirit. So if God restores all things, as Acts 3:21 says, universal restoration, um, is the goodness of neighborhood life and cultural neighborhoods, laughter on the porches, or the rhythm of special festivals, or the sound of children in the street. Does all of that play into that? So what then gets transformed? Well, while there's a lot of good things in culture, there's a lot of bad things too. And you have things like exploitation and oppression and segregation, injustice. Those things, they're burned away, they're taken away. And there's this redeemed idea of color and rhythm and hospitality and solidarity that is restored, that I think we take into the idea of heaven and the idea of eternity as well. Okay, so now this is a key question. One of the things that brings us great joy in life is our pets. And for some, that's dogs, and for some, that's cats, and for some, it's birds, and some, it's fish, or whatever. So do all dogs go to heaven? You remember that? I think that's a Disney thing. Uh, are pets a part of that cultural experience? Do they have a place in eternity? Now, here's where a difference takes place. Different cultures have different perspective about pets. In the United States, dogs are not seen as scavengers, they are seen as man's best friend. Okay. In other parts of the world, they're a nuisance. They're scavengers, they're in the way, that type of thing. What about other things in our environment? Things that we enjoy, birds or animals, or things that we put up with, like insects, mosquitoes. And if all that is done away with in some fashion, does that mean there's no honey in heaven? I mean, if there is there a place for bees in heaven? So you see how wild this can kind of get, the thinking along these lines. So let me give you a quick theology of pets. Christian tradition doesn't give one single answer on this. And in fact, the Bible's silent about it. There's nothing that talks about it. But what we do know is when in Genesis 1, when God creates everything, he says it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. So even pets are part of that which brings goodness to the human experience. Then there are other individuals that have commented on that. One of them is C.S. Lewis. He imagined that beloved pets might share in the eternal redemption. But by far, the most famous individual that had a affirmative perspective on pets is Saint Francis of Assisi. And he hinted at this hope that everything is transformed and nothing that is good is lost. So you'll see pictures like this of St. Francis where there are animals that surround him and so forth. His story is an interesting one. He actually uh, came from a pretty well-off family and took this vow of poverty and became a monk. And he did not see animals as lesser than human beings. And this is found in some of his writings. He calls uh, animals like brother wolf, that type of thing. Even celestial bodies he called brother sun and sister moon. And he even wrote a canticle of creatures that sing praise to God. So these stories about St. Francis include things like preaching to the birds, or urban legend that he tamed a wolf that was terrifying a village. He began the practice that some churches still continue to this day, of blessing animals, that type of thing. So C.S. Lewis, St. Francis, that type of thing, which leads to another question. So this is sort of like Columbo, right? Oh, one more thing. Um, will animals still be predators in eternity? Now, this will bring out this famous passage that we read in Isaiah. So I'm going to first turn to Isaiah 11. And in Isaiah chapter 11, we are told that there is this picture of not danger, but one of cooperation among the animals of the world. So in chapter 11, it says in verse 6, the wolf will lie with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near a cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the water covers the sea. So you read that and you say, does the role of animals change? Are mountain lions now safe? Can you use one? Can you pet them? Can you have one as a pet? That type of thing. There's some mystery that follows this, though. I'm going to read one more. Isaiah 65. In Isaiah chapter 65, There's that passage again in chapter 65 that talks about judgment and salvation. You come down to verse 25, and it's almost a repetition of what we just read. But it's reiterated. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, and the dust will be the serpent's food. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. Okay, animals are safe. However, if that's true, how are they changed? Will a change in diet bring a radical change to a lion if he doesn't eat meat? Will he still look like a lion if he doesn't eat meat? If he can't hunt his prey? So if you turn a lion into a herbivore, is the lion still a lion? Or is it something else? You see, it gets complicated when you talk in these terms. There might be a point that Isaiah's using here. Maybe it's not talking about animals, but empires, that these animals represent empires. We know that the book of Daniel does that, uses animals as a picture of Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece and Rome. So, anyways, okay, so Origen, uh, one of the first early church fathers that talked about this restoration of all things, said that predatory animals will be transfigured, violence, hunger, and enmity will be undone, and creation will live in universal peace as things return to God. So there are theologians that have written about this topic over the years, even though it's hard to make a conclusive answer from the scripture. So that's the animal world. Now, how about the human world? How are relationships perfected? Yeah, we have a resurrection body. Is the way that we relate to each other changed, and how is that changed? I think when we think of heaven, we think of it as a place of intimacy. And let's begin with Jesus, okay? A lot of times people use this language after they lose a loved one. Uh, he or she is with Jesus now, okay? And it brings great hope and comfort. And we certainly long for and anticipate reunion with those that have gone before us. While that is a really exciting idea, remember, Jesus took on flesh. He was resurrected. He became incarnate. He is no longer omnipresent. His existence, as Philippians kenosis passage talks about, is confined into a human life. Now, if that's true, how does that work in eternity? When we talk about a person being with Jesus, and they have this intimacy with each other, the person that we love and Jesus, do they have to take turns? And how long do you have to wait till it's your turn? Considering billions and billions of people are in heaven, does that mean you have to wait billions of years before you have your opportunity to be with Jesus? Unless, so as we talked in previous weeks, what if heaven is an alternate universe, not one that is exactly the same like the one we're living in? And what are the dynamics that change that might allow this intimate relationship, not just with one person at a time, but with all people? Something to think about. Obviously, there's this special relationship that takes place on earth. You have best friends and you have marriage, and What does that look like into eternity? Are the same two people uh, mutually exclusive into eternity? Or does that even operate the same way? Uh, Jesus says in Matthew 22:30, you will neither be given to marriage. So what what then is this idea of perfected love? So two prominent theologians, Augustine and Aquinas, taught that the resurrection gives us the capacity to love free from jealousy, fear, and limitation, and that our love for family and friends are folded into a greater communion where every person is beloved, not just your immediate family. Okay. Don't know. All of this is speculation. We know that friendship that we may never have known before, one that is free from the way we hurt each other, whether it's through gossip or brokenness or hurt or betrayal or whatever it may be. So that leads to another question. All right. Since there's 100 galaxies, are we the only intelligent life in all of creation? And if so, why is the universe so large? Why is it so old? Why is it so beautiful? Has another race been around a lot longer than we have? And if so, where are they? So, would extraterrestrial intelligence be a problem if there are many different species throughout the different galaxies? And then the question will pop up, well, how does the work of Jesus relate to them? Or is his work only related to earthlings? Um, does it mean that Earth is not so much this special, unique place in the cosmos, but is one of many? So, for a lot of Christians, that poses a threat because we like to think, oh, God made the entire universe for us. Okay, well, kind of, but not kind of. The assumption of Paul is that Christ's incarnation and atonement is cosmic in its scope, that somehow it affects all of creation. If we're not alone in the universe, uh, is there a reasonable chance we're not alone in heaven either? And by that, I mean other life other than earthlings. And I'm not talking about green Martians necessarily. I'm just talking about other forms of life that could be in the universe. When we get to heaven, will we still have a free will? Um, can we make free choices? Does God safeguard the bad choices that we make and prevent us from doing those type of things? If so, are we really free into eternity? So a lot of argument takes place among philosophers in this regard. What makes a person free? And is there the possibility that we can be free and yet um, persuaded by God to only make good choices throughout the remainder of eternity? You see how complex this topic can become when we think outside of the resurrection of Jesus, outside the idea of we're going to be resurrected bodily. There's a lot of questions that come up. So here's how I want to finish this study. I just want to do a quick summary of what we've covered over the last 3 weeks prior and tonight. So this is kind of a recap. I think we learned that heaven is not an escape to someplace else, but it is a fulfillment of God's ongoing work in creation. And to go to heaven is not to abandon the earth. We're given the promise at the end of Revelation that he's making all things new. That does not that is not destruction. It implies restoration. Secondly, Heaven is resurrection. It's not disembodiment. It's not like we're ghosts that are floating around in the clouds. As Jesus rose with a transformed body, so shall we, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. Our future is an embodied joy, not a ghostly survival. Next, heaven. Heaven is a um, heaven is a renewed creation. So we looked at that in Isaiah 65. Paul talks about it in Romans chapter 8 that all of creation is groaning for the revelation of the sons of God and daughters of God. John's vision again in Revelation 21. Next, number 4, heaven is communion, not isolation. I really do believe with all my heart we are reunited with loved ones. Our love is somehow perfected. It is somehow expanded beyond what we have the capacity to do here on earth. Obviously, the things that are harmful, God is taking care of. And I think that reference in 1 John 3:2 is important. We shall see him as he is, and we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Then last, heaven begins now. It's not just something in the future. Jesus made this statement several times. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's within the realm of possibility of experiencing a foretaste of what heaven is going to be like. So maybe that is found in every act of mercy, um, every act of beauty, every reconciliation that we see taking place. And so the bottom line, I think, is this: when we ask, what on earth can we know about heaven? Heaven is both a future promise and a present foretaste. And I think it is one of those things that we can feel inside of our bones. And yet at the same time, we are to live out the life God has given us to the best of our ability in this world. So we're going to stop our recording, and we're going to stop the share, and we're going to then see if there's any questions, comments, dialogue that you want to do.